Discussion on that motion? Good. I'm going to, for this one, not say all in favor. I'll just say if you are opposed to accepting the resolution to conduct this meeting, please say aye. Seeing none, that will pass unanimously. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. All right, so we have some presentations this evening. The first presentation is the COVID-19 transportation impact and opportunities. What? Oh, minutes. I'm sorry. Did I miss that? Oh, I'm sorry. I missed minutes. For the June 11th meeting. Does everyone looked over the minutes?
The June 11th meeting.
Second by Jeanette Burchell.
So minutes been moved to approval and seconded by Mr. Parrish and seconded by Ms. Rischel. Discussion on that? Everybody looked at them, had time to see them? All right, I won't say all in favor. I'll just say, is anyone opposed to the minutes being approved?
Madam
Very
Chair,
well,
this is Jennifer Boysko. I'll abstain since I was not a member.
Yeah.
And with
one abstention. Hi, Jennifer. How are you? It's good to see you.
Well, good to see you too.
Even a little tiny box. Good to see you. Everybody else is in favor? All right. Well, that will pass with just one abstention. Okay. So now we have Mr. Jasper to do a presentation on the COVID transportation impacts and opportunities.
Good evening, Chair Randall and members of the authority. Can I just do a quick sound check to make sure you can hear me okay?
Can hear you just fine, Mr. Jasper.
Okay, try again. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Good evening, Chair Randall, members of the authority. As you all know, you don't need me to tell you, the pandemic has touched the lives and livelihoods of Northern Virginians and continues to do so. From a transportation perspective, the pandemic is a unique event, at least in my lifetime. While I have seen events with major impacts on localized areas and regional scale events that have had a relatively short life, the pandemic has already caused unprecedented disruption across our entire region for nearly 4 months. While the prospect of a vaccine offers hope that one day all this will go away and we can return to something close to normal, NVTA staff are considering the possibility that we need to revisit and our approach to helping the authority meet your two primary responsibilities, which are, as you know, the long-range transportation plan for Northern Virginia, transaction, and programming your regional revenues through your 6-year program, which is obviously an agenda item later this evening. As you may recall, we have been ramping up our activities for the next transaction update since the beginning of this year. And this task that I'm going to speak about this evening provides a timely opportunity to explore potential future impacts of the pandemic on transportation, as well as opportunities to improve our planning and programming processes and future transportation conditions across the region. Next slide, please, Dev. My co-presenter this evening is David Roden from AECOM. David has led the transportation modeling and analytical activities for both transaction and your funding programs over the past 5 years. I will speak to the first 2 bullets on this agenda list and the last item as well. And David will cover the really more interesting bits in the middle, the scenario definitions and the results and comparisons. I'm also joined this evening by Jason Mumford and Amy Volt, also from AECOM, to help as needed with Q&A in a while. Next slide, please. Okay. Our overall goals this evening are to share some analysis that explores both short-term operating conditions as well as some considerations for future transportation investments. At a high level, our approach to this analysis uses 4 scenarios. Each scenario has a similar but different set of assumptions, enabling us to compare the transportation impact of each scenario with each other and against if I can say, a pandemic-free baseline. While the most recent transaction update pioneered a similar scenario-based analysis, this task provides valuable and timely lessons that will help us to structure and refine our analytical process to the next transaction update. I would just like to say at this point that this task to look at COVID effects has not been used as an input to the fiscal year 2020 to 2025 6-year program recommendations that you'll be discussing later this evening. So just to restate, this has not been used in those recommendations. Next slide, please. This slide provides a simple visualization of our approach to this task, linking scenario development to generation of transportation impacts through modeling approaches, and then how we can use the results. But actually, I would like to draw your attention to the very important note above the visualization, in that these scenarios are what we consider to be plausible and possible future scenarios, but they're not intended to be a prediction of the future, nor do they imply any preferences on the part of NVTA staff. They are a tool to enable us to explore possible outcomes over the coming years. I'd also say, as we go through this presentation, particularly David's part of this presentation, do not focus too much on precise numbers, but focus more on relativities between numbers and overall scales of impact. Next slide, please. So this all started, as you know, for us in Northern Virginia back in March, and just a quick walk down memory lane. On Wednesday, March 11th, we held our annual roundtable at the NVTA offices. On Thursday, March 12th, you had your last fully in-person regular authority meeting. On Friday, March 13th, Governor Northam orders all Virginia K-12 schools closed for a minimum of 2 weeks. And then on Monday, March 16th, Executive Director Ms. Backman informed NVTA staff that we are to move to 100% telework basis starting the following day. And I'm sure your organizations have all gone through something similar in that time frame almost 4 months ago. And since then, telework has increased, schools and many businesses have closed, travel has decreased throughout the region. There are safety concerns expressed about using transit and shared rides. And in addition to that, I would add that businesses have adjusted as best they can with widespread use of curbside pickup and online shopping and surges in home deliveries. So some pretty dramatic changes that have now become somewhat sustained over the last 4 months. Next slide, please. So these next couple of slides are really focusing on some national trends. This first one looking at national employment trends. This information dates back to a June 5th roundtable organized by one of our consultant team members. And this was asking folks in a survey that they conducted, which of the following things had happened to them in the past month. And as you can see, a fortunate 63% said none of these things had happened, but the remaining 37% had had some impact on their employment over that time frame. The little box to the right shows how disproportionately that affected younger generations. Next slide, please. Also looking at national trends on working from home, the question was posed and reported back in a roundtable at the end of May. Are you currently working from home? This is about half and half. Of the 53% who said they are working from home, 12% had never worked from home before. 17% had, but only about 25% of the time. So I guess about 5 days a month. 12% between 26 and 50% of the time, and 12% more than 50% of the time. So yeah, there was a mixed impact. A lot of people couldn't work from home, didn't work from home. A lot of people did, but they hadn't necessarily done that before. Next slide, please. Also looking at national trends, this dates back to a mid-June survey updates, and the participants in the survey indicated that they felt they personally will be going back to work well in advance of their children going back to school or into daycare, with 65% of respondents thinking that they would be back at work within 3 months from mid-June, but also thinking that it'll be 6 months before the same number of them felt their children were going to be back to school. Next slide, please. Again, at the national level, survey respondents were saying that indicating that public transportation is going to lag car trips in terms of trip making behavior. And if you focus all the way across to the right-hand side of this slide, a pretty staggering 35% of people, as indicated by the green line, said that they did not expect to make a trip by plane or train, be that for personal or business reasons, for more than a year. In terms of using public transportation, about 25% the same, and for driving slightly lower, closer to 20%. So quite a dramatic impact expected by a plurality of people in the survey. Next slide, please. Turning to take a regional look using numbers provided by VDOT and presented to the CTB meeting in mid-June. The blue line indicating interstates in Northern Virginia, the orange lines indicating other non-interstate roads in Northern Virginia. And basically this compares 2020 traffic volumes to corresponding day in 2019. And at the depth of the pandemic so far, daily volume was 55% lower than the 2019 levels. More recently, you can see a little bit of an uptick, but I would point out that the most recent uptick in the orange line to the right-hand side coincides with Memorial Day. So probably a little bit of distortion at the end there, but certainly it does appear to be trending upwards at the moment through the end of May. Next slide, please. No doubt many of you have seen this information from WMATA indicating significant reductions across Metro Rail, Metro Bus, and the Metro Access service, with some pretty significant delays there. And this was reported out back in mid-May. Next slide, please. Actually, I'm going to skip over the next two slides. These relate to the kind of the phased approach to reopening, because I want to hand over to David Roden. So, Dev, if you could advance to slide, that's it, 14, thank you. And David Roden is on the line, and I'll let him talk about the next dozen or so slides.
Yes, thank you, Keith. What we have in this slide is a kind of description overview of the scenarios we were looking at as part of this analysis. So we're looking at both the short-term impacts in the next 2 years, and then what we're calling a new normal for 2025. We have 4 scenarios outlined here. One that's a quick response, where we expecting most of the economy to open in the fall, back to school as well. And then an active transportation scenario where more people will take bike and walk for their short distance trips. We also looked at a scenario that had a second wave of pandemic restrictions in the October-November timeframe and how that might affect things. And then a cautious recovery scenario where things are open more gradually, people feel they need to be more safe, and they're reluctant to use the transportation system to do business travel or attend schools. So that particular alternative was involved there. On the next slide, we're showing some of the assumptions that went into that. So you have the 4 scenarios across the top, and then short-term and a new normal types of parameters for those activities. So in this case, the telework is basically assuming a 10% and the quick response by the September, October, November timeframe. But in the new normal, it's also about 10%. So continuing increase in teleworking throughout the region. And many of the other alternatives show higher values than that in the near and long-term impacts. We have lost jobs as well. In the quick recovery, many of those jobs got recovered, but in the second wave, for example, we have a significant long-term impact on employment. School attendance is another big issue, and obviously this was developed before Fairfax County came up with their proposal. So in the quick and active response, we're assuming that in September, about 90% of the schools, children would return to school. And then the second wave, there would be no school in the fall. But in the cautious recovery, which is more like what Fairfax County has proposed right now, we're assuming in the short term, the November-October timeframe, that about 40% of the school children would return, but by the new normal 2025, that would be back towards 90%. We also have a transit safety perception concept here, where people are either feeling more or less comfortable using transit. Obviously in the quick recovery, that they are more comfortable getting back to transit, but in many of the other scenarios, they're much more reluctant to return to transit very quickly. And just to summarize the active transportation scenario, we're basically assuming that 60% of the trips that are less than 5 miles long will use a walk or bike activities more regularly, and therefore we have about a 30% increase overall in that mode. On the next slide, we're showing some of the short-term impacts. Again, this is the next 2 years. And on the slide after that, slide 17, we have an example of the impacts, how that affects vehicle miles of travel. And you can see initially the first 3 scenarios increase relatively quickly. In the blue line, the cautious scenario increases very slowly. These humps in the analysis you see there are basically the stages or phases of reopening that the governor dictates throughout the state. And you can see that the purple line, where the second phase comes in, shows a very big drop, and that recovery takes place a lot longer. And the next slide is just kind of showing a blow up of where these things end up in the 90 to 94% range overall. And on the slide after that, we're looking at some peak urban areas, which shows similar patterns. And after that, peak suburban vehicle miles of travel, another pattern similar to that. Ultimately, in the slide 21, we're showing some speed impacts, where there's an average of about 25 miles an hour overall in the region, but that could increases in the near term to about 30 miles an hour because of reduced travel overall in our system. And on the page after that, we look at the impacts on transit ridership. So transit ridership is hit very hard initially, and it comes back a bit. The second wave obviously draws that back down a lot. And the more cautious scenario shows that transit would take a long time to recover and would never get back to its original level, which is the dashed line on the top. So you're seeing a good drop in transit ridership throughout these scenarios. On the next slide is the person hours of delay, which is primary reason that transit is not doing as well. Because of the reduction in auto travel, the teleworking, the cautious scenarios, we're seeing very dramatic reductions in person hours of delay in the near term. And even in the long term, that only gets up to about 50% of what we originally saw before this pandemic started. The next slide is still starting what we're calling new normal, which is kind of looking at the horizon year 2025, which is where NVTA does a good bit of its work for transaction and how those impacts might carry on in the longer term. So the first slide there, next slide shows us some of the parameters. We are looking at the transaction performance metrics here. There's a multimodal performance measures that address accessibility and mobility, congestion, transit ridership, et cetera, are all included in those parameters. And on the slide after that, we show some sample impact measures for each of these scenarios. So the base 2025 conditions we're showing here are what have been used in the NVTA analysis up to this point. So you see some of those levels of impact on trips and mode shares and hours of delay. And then across the board, we're seeing fairly dramatic reduction in many of those parameters. The quick response is not as dramatic a reduction, but the other scenarios, the active transportation, second wave, and cautious, show more impact overall than the quick recovery scenario would generate. The active transportation drops a lot of auto trips and increases transit mode share. And the cautious scenario where people are more cautious for a longer period of time shows more dramatic impacts. And you can see in the hours of travel and the hours of delay, those increases are fairly significant. One more look at that from a point of view of jurisdictions on the next slide. We can see that the more urban area jurisdictions like Arlington and Alexandria are showing the greater impacts overall in all of these scenarios. The suburban type jurisdictions in Fairfax and Prince William County are in the middle, and Loudoun County is showing the least impact, though those impacts are still very significant. On the next slide, we show the impacts of the same jurisdictions, but for person hours of delay, and these numbers are very large. Again, the urban areas are affected more significantly, and Loudoun County a little less, but still it's over 50% reduction in person hours of delay for all of these jurisdictions. And finally, let's see, yeah, we're showing some maps here that we had used for the transaction analysis of the weighted performance measures. So the far left is the pre-COVID, you might say, condition for 2025. And you can see where the intensity of the color is where there are more problems or issues from a performance measure point of view. The middle graph is the cautious scenario and how you can see less dramatic impacts on congestion and more yellow and overall. And on the right, you see the green levels show the benefits. And obviously, the darker green has more significant benefit or changes as a result of the COVID scenarios, but most of the region shows benefits overall in COVID reduction of the performance measures that are important to NVTA. On the next slide, we show some blowups of these. I won't go into any detail, but we have Tysons and Leesburg shown there, and on the slide after that, Woodbridge and Arlington areas. The dark green there is where the impacts are most significant. And then we have a few roadways identified at the bottom, I-66 and 95, for example. And finally, I'll turn it back over to Keith to wrap this up and give us an overview of what we found.
Thank you, David. Deb, if you could advance, thank you. So just a very quick high-level recap of our observations for the new normal 2025. All four scenarios that we looked at assumed a very modest increase in telework, 10 to 15% more, which, if you recall the slide I showed early on, looking at national trends about how people had changed their teleworking behavior. This is very much at the conservative end of the scale in terms of difference, and school attendance levels generally return to close to, if not on pre-COVID levels by 2025. All four scenarios reduce auto and transit trips, with the active transportation scenario having the largest impact on auto trips and cautious recovery the largest impact on transit trips. All four scenarios reduce person hours of delay. And when we say person hours of delay, we mean delay by anyone traveling in a motorized vehicle. This isn't exclusively in autos. As David mentioned just previously, the impact is most pronounced among the inner jurisdictions, but is still significant for the outer jurisdictions, and is in the geographic visualizations. The impact is evident along major corridors. Next slide, please. So our conclusions for the short term, the majority of changes occur within the first 18 months based upon the assumptions that were made before leveling off around mid-2021. The new normal, looking out to 2025, teleworking and other economic impacts result in traffic volumes and ridership that do not fully recover to pre-COVID levels, reductions in travel time and time lost in congestion, excuse me. But while we see the congestion reductions obviously as a positive for the region, the transit ridership reduction is not a positive and may indeed be somewhat challenging to some transit agencies in terms of lost revenue and increased subsidy requirements and so on, and loss of service. One more slide, please, Dev. So what are the implications for NVTA's planning and programming responsibilities and the potential for new transportation policies? These findings have given us a lot of food for thought for the upcoming transaction process and the update, and beyond that, looking at future funding programs. Starting with potential policies, if these are needed, we don't suggest any at this stage, but if any are needed, they could be at the state, regional, or local level, and indeed would almost inevitably involve employers and employees as well. I mentioned incentivization here as something that might be worth considering, not necessarily by NVTA, although as some of you may know, the RM3P initiative that we're undertaking with the Commonwealth right now does include an element that includes incentivization of travel behaviors to encourage or not using single occupant vehicles. So incentivization might be a piece of this when it comes to policies. We want to definitely consider and support the focus on any initiatives for transit agencies and national associations such as APTA, the APTA, American Public Transportation Association, to mitigate those safety perception concerns. Here at NVTA, we do very much like to be data-driven, using our own or other resources, and in many senses, we already do this a lot through regarding the pandemic, through our contacts with regional businesses and regional business associations. We do envision greater use of focus group activity for the upcoming transaction update, which will really help us to understand how people make choices at the household level and the business level. We definitely would like to better understand the impact of TDM, travel demand management programs, at the regional level, what works best, what can we try, what's new, and so on. Projects that support multiple modes of transportation are important. Things where we can look for synergies between modes, integrate modes better, and so on for seamless travel options is something we always try to look at, and this really emphasizes the need for that, particularly anything that can reduce the dependency on driver-alone options. And finally, what we mean by flexible use of right-of-way is to kind of explore opportunities to maximize person throughput, with a flexible approach to kind of optimize capacity of the transportation system possibly on a dynamic basis as well. So I think this is what we've taken away from all this so far. There's more work to be done, but we are getting close to the kind of the in-depth transaction update starting later this year. And so this pandemic, bad as it is, has actually given us some timely opportunity to really sharpen our thinking on what lies ahead for us. So with that, David and I and the rest of the team will gladly take any questions you may have.
That was fascinating. It was. That was really interesting. So we will go down and do questions, and I will start with Chairman McKay. Jeff, you there?
No questions.
Okay, Chair Wheeler.
I thought it was fascinating. More food for thought, but I have no questions.
Okay, Board Member Crystal.
Hi, that was a very well given presentation, but the content was pretty miserable. Thank you for sharing with us and appreciate the analysis here to make sure that we're not just basing all of our decisions and efforts on conjecture, but it is a sobering picture to be sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Mayor Wilson.
Ditto what Board Member Crystal said.
Oh, I can see your hair now. It looks amazing.
I spent a while on it earlier today. Thanks.
Councilmember Snyder.
I don't really have any questions except a comment. If anything, it seems to me it's a little too optimistic based upon what we're seeing so far. And I would be interested in a more intense view of the next 2 to 3 years. 5 years out is all very interesting, but things are not looking particularly good over the next 2 to 3 years. I wondered if the consultants could make any comments about that.
Thank you. Mayor Rischel. Oh, I'm sorry. Does somebody want to make comments about that? David or Keith, did you guys want to say anything about what Mr. Snyder just said?
Well, I can certainly start, and David may have more. I mean, the question of whether or not it is too optimistic or not. I think really that's where I'm emphasising the assumptions, and let me say that the assumptions that we've used for these 4 scenarios have, to the best extent that we've been able to do so, have been drawn upon national and regional examples of how you and others are responding to the situation. But it is obviously a very dynamic situation, particularly where we are with education right now, which could potentially have a big impact on transportation. But we just try to be realistic based on our observations of what others are doing around the region and around the country in developing these scenario assumptions.
Okay. Mayor Rischel.
Very interesting, but no questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer.
I think that we have to remind ourselves that we have only been in this now for 4 months. And what NVTA does is capital funding for projects that oftentimes can take several years of planning, at least a year of engineering, and 2 to 3 years of construction on large projects. So we're really talking about a template of anywhere from 5 to 7 or 8 years, and the funding considerations that we're going to be looking at in the next year will be through the lens of FY 27, 28, 29. And so I think any assumptions about the impact of this pandemic on our economy and changes in work styles, lifestyles, and the impact of all of that on transportation systems is it's important to ask these questions, but I would caution us not to embrace any set of assumptions. It's good to think about it, and it's good to have assumptions along a spectrum, or a continuum, I should say, of options. But we've only been at this for 4 months, and so I share Dave Snyder's concerns. I think that we've got a long way to go. But in terms of what NVTA does in our core mission, I, at this point, do not see huge changes in our policies or our strategic approach to funding projects.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Hines.
Well, it's interesting because I was sort of thinking the opposite, I think, of what Mr. Meyer just said, which is I'm mindful of the presentation we had 2 years ago at the Technology Summit, where the man from Maryland came and showed us the maps of what happened when the Pope came and 5% of people stayed home and didn't go to work anymore that day, and how almost every bottleneck in the region went away. And so this 10% assumption scenario on telework, which I actually think may end up being low overall, that we'll see more than that, has me wondering about our networks and whether things that are in our plan now should be delayed, whether there are other things we should be doing. We are a kind of a single function entity, though, in the sense that our mission is to fund increased capacity. So how does our mission change if, you know, we went in the tank and all of a sudden we're way below what our functional capacity was, you know, before? So those are the kinds of questions I mean, those are the same questions I have about smart scale, honestly, as I think about that at the CTB level, because we're putting money on projects that are out just as far as NVTA is. And it's not entirely clear to me. I mean, some of them, the 81 improvements, the 95 improvements, those are things. But some of these other things, I really wonder if we're, you know, if we're making the wisest choices that we, in an absence of information about what the new normal is going to be. So I think, you know, I think all of our questions are the right questions to be asking now. I don't think anybody knows the answers. But I do think we have to put both sides of that coin on the table.
Yep, I agree. Thank you. Delegate Watts, is she's on it with us, right?
I'm here, yes.
There you go. Hello.
Stimulating presentation just by the questions and the comments that have been heard thus far. From my point of view, long term, I think it really puts that much more onus on us to look at the long-term benefits. And that's where the Northern Virginia Transportation Plan is so important, that we really look at that rather than quick fixes, because we'll be relieved if some of those quick fixes needs. The other very near-term comment I would make is that I find the second wave scenario to be overly optimistic, absent having a vaccine in numbers that really can be distributed, because it shows recovery by January, February of 2021. And again, absent having adequate vaccine, that's just too optimistic.
Yeah. Thank you. Delegate Rome.
Yes, Madam Chair, I do have a few comments and I have a question for Mr. Jasper. Just to start with, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, so I would ask Mr. Jasper first if he could just address whether or not the projections that we're looking at when he had mentioned basically like, you know, permanency more or less on this, do these figures actually include projected growth, you know, say residential growth in the region? Both for the NVTA jurisdictions as well as, say, the surrounding jurisdictions of Stafford and Fauquier, and how that will actually contribute to mass transit ridership and vehicle traffic?
Thank you for that question, Delegate Rome. I'm going to ask David if he would answer that. I think I know the answer to the question, but I know David knows the answer to this question.
Yes, they do include the 2025 forecast that the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments has generated. That's been used in the transaction process for 2025 and 2040. So we are basing the land use projections on those. Obviously, COVID-19 could change land use plans, but that was not assumed in this analysis.
Well, so Madam Chair, I would probably suggest that there is going to be an impact of some sort to our residential development based on COVID, though projects that have already been approved, or what I should say is projects that are either currently under review by planning commissions that have been, you know, in the system for a good while, or projects that are already underway, but they haven't been actually built out yet, that those are going to continue because the initial investment's already been made. The question that I would have is that if you're looking at 2025 here, is something going to come up that would be pitched in 2021, 2022, for example, that hasn't gone through the mechanisms of local government yet. And basically, would it be sound investment at that point for, that developer to want to go into that area, right? So that's one of the things that I think is going to probably change these numbers, though I don't fault the data. I don't fault the people who put the data together. This is what we got right now. And this goes into the realm of unknowns. But I do have concern about, the actual accuracy of something that is relatively impossible to project right now. And the other comment that I'll make, Madam Chair, is really based on, it seems that our vehicle miles traveled are going to be more consistent as people still have to get to work than ridership on mass transit prior to a vaccine. The reason for that being that people are naturally going to be more afraid of being in an area, an enclosed area in a, circulated ventilation system with people riding, mass transit in general, whether it's bus, whether it's VRE, whether it's metro, whatever it is. And so I think you'll have quite a bit of difference in terms of change in your mass transit projection for ridership. Once a vaccine becomes more available, then you'll have an effect on your roads per se, on your vehicle miles traveled. I think that you're going to see if they were running on the same curve right now, you would see one of them go up and one of them go down. They would kind of split off somewhere down the line based on when that vaccine comes around. So I don't know how to project for data for that, and I don't know how to project a fiscal impact on that. But it is just something I want to raise as something that we should probably be watching for the future.
Those are good comments. Those are good comments. Thank you, Delegate. Is Mr. Kolb on the phone with us? On the line with us?
I am. Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure.
No questions. Just want to thank Keith and David for pulling this together. Obviously, a very dynamic situation that is going to have a pretty long tail to it. So going to be interesting to keep watching these numbers and see how it impacts the work of NVTA. And thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Wood, Mayor Wood. Mayor Wood.
Yeah. Can you hear me, or was I just talking to myself?
Hey.
Can you hear
You're
me?
talking to yourself.
Oh, okay.
We think you do that all the time, though. There you are.
No, I just attach myself to all the great dialogue that just happened. I think that it was funny as I was listening. I was thinking us encouraging people to telework actually helps us and works to our benefit because we get to see the roads and see where all the work really needs to be done. But no, it's great for long range planning. So thank you for your presentation.
Yeah. Ms. Cuervo. Is Helen on with us? Ms. Cuervo, you're there? Because if you are, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Helen, there you are. Yep.
Okay. Just wanted to say the 10 to 15% increase in telework is really something we've been trying to do for a very long time, and to have this sort of launch us to that level, I think is good news. I'm just wondering how we can help maintain that. We always are going to be growing. Our roads are always continuously being congested. So anything that we can do to continue that teleworking. I know the department's plan is never to return to everybody fully being in the office, that it is our long-term plan to have those who can telework as much as possible. And that helps with everybody on the road. Now, if the federal government continues teleworking, that's a huge advantage. Right now, even with the position of the economy and things that are going on, Interstate 95, the general purpose lanes are getting near pre-COVID levels. Now, not the express lanes, but the general purpose. So we are, even with this going on, swiftly going back to that congested forum. So I just wonder what we can do to continue to encourage that telework and how we can focus on that. And also the active transportation. I mean, I think every bike store sold out pretty soon after COVID stepped in. And that means more people biking and walking to where they need to go rather than clogging the road. So I do see some positive things, and I wonder what we can do to encourage that to continue and not turn back. I mean, there are definitely obviously some very negative things that this pandemic has created, and certainly has some significant impacts on different kinds of transit. But there are some very positive things that I hope we look to see how we can help flourish.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you for the presentation. I think there's some very good data here. I do want to, I guess, align myself with the comments. I believe it was Mayor David Mayer that made these before about not jumping to conclusions too quickly. I think that we have still a lot of experience ahead of us. I do think that widespread teleworking is going to become part of our new normal. I do think, though, that in terms of the long-term impacts on travel patterns and what the implications are for our policies and our projects, I think a lot of it may depend on the availability of a vaccine, but also I think that a lot more time is needed to see how things develop. I do think it's very good information, though, and it's very good for us to have this in front of us as we are thinking about projects and decisions going forward.
Thank you. Senator Boysko?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. This was really good food for thought. Since we have no crystal ball, it was interesting to see some predictions. I will just say that I will agree with what Helen said, talking about the increase in telework. I think is a great positive for everybody in the community. I actually got to skip 4 hours on the road earlier in the week for a 15-minute meeting in Richmond, and did not miss I-95 one bit. But I'm looking forward to, seeing how this all plays out. And certainly we've got a good group of people to help look at the future of our transportation system. And I'm just glad to be a part of this discussion.
Thank you. Mayor Parrish.
Are seeing into this time that we're dealing with, and it's certainly a challenging moment. I know one of the things I think about is how does now compare to what was taking place in the Spanish flu, and I know that was 100 years ago, but nevertheless, what impacts could we take from a study of that to this? And I know the study that was done and presented here tonight was for transportation, specifically here in Northern Virginia. And it has some general thoughts and then far fewer specific thoughts about what really will happen. And I think many of the speakers that have come before me have indicated there's more to be determined. And we will see more as we live and go through this. But I found it interesting in several of the charts, chart 22 and then chart 33, the conclusions talk about the new normal. And the new normal, I think, was, and Keith, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the new normal was 2025, right? 2025. So it's interesting that your chart here on page 33 says traffic volumes and transit ridership that do not fully recover to pre-COVID levels. Hopefully, because of some teleworking, we'll see. And I agree with Helen about trying to continue to foster that because that helps us all. I also agree with Monica and others who have said, I think from what I'm seeing most recently is traffic almost back to normal. It was pretty good there for a couple of months, but it's still pretty challenging. Senator Boysko just said she doesn't want to be on 95, and even today, I get it. So we've got more to learn, more to see, more to go through, and it's interesting information, and we'll factor that into decisions that we make and maybe even keep our powder a little dry as well. Thank you, Chair Rendell.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair. So, so if you're in the room, if you could if you could mute yourself, because otherwise I hear your feedback. Thanks. So I think I would associate myself mostly with Mary's comments. If we go to page 32, if we assume that teleworking is going to be 10 to 15%, I think that's that assumption is too low. And it is because of the area we live in. We live in a very technologically advanced area. And so we have both the infrastructure and the type of jobs that allows us to do teleworking. People weren't doing it because they just didn't think, bosses didn't think they can get the work done from home. But I saw a survey that said that it looks like 85% of all the work is still being done when people are at home. Things that are not being done are, things like therapy that I used to do, but so much of the work that can be done at home actually is being done at home. So I think that telework number is going to go significantly up. And I don't know how much higher we actually want to get. I think 10 to 15% is about where we want to stay. If you get much higher than that, you may don't need an NVTA anymore, because the congestion relief will take care of itself if the telework happens. To speak to something Delegate Rome said, I do think you're correct. I think when people are going to move to the area, but just for the very purpose of the fact that they will move to a very technologically advanced area and still work from home. So they may move here, but it may not result in a lot more traffic on the road. When I asked, I had the reason to ask DAR, the Dallas Area Association of Realtors, about home sales and about foreclosures, and they said they're seeing almost none. They're seeing almost none. Now, there is some stimulus money coming in, but not a lot, and so they're seeing almost no home sales right now, or no foreclosures right now. And on the phone call today with the governor, he said that the revenues to the state are coming in higher than expected. And we haven't even got to the second round of revenues yet for 2021. So that's also an indication. Northern Virginia is a well-educated area, a fairly affluent area, and an area where people can adapt easily and still keep going. So I think that these numbers are actually kind of a rosier picture than we might see. And we're going to have to take a look at all of our long range plans to see if they still line up, both in NVTA and also in all of our jurisdictions. And I know the reason Loudoun's numbers are coming in lower, better, whatever, is because Loudoun, taking out Western Loudoun County, where only about 15% of the population lives, Loudoun is a very tech county. I mean, everyone works from home anyway, and so we know for a fact that it just if anything, like my husband, for example, they're saying, don't come back to work. You're doing the same amount of work from home. And I think that's actually happened a lot. I also don't believe we're ever going to see metro numbers where they were. I don't believe that's ever going to be again. And again, to Ms. Rome's point, even though the study was done that said, COVID is no more transmittable on a metro train or a bus than it is in an office building, people's minds are not going to believe that. They're going to believe if I'm on a bus, I'm in greater danger. And so I just believe there's going to be so much more teleworking, much more adjusted schedules. So I think this is amazingly good information, but I think it's pretty rosy. And I will end with one of my favorite shows is Jurassic Park. And one place in Jurassic Park, somebody says, dinosaurs and man have just been thrown back in the mix together. Who knows what's going to happen? That's how I feel right now. We have no idea what's going to happen because we haven't done this for 100 years, and 100 years ago, things looked much different anyway. So it's good information to have and to keep and to rely on, but I got a feeling I think it's going to impact us a lot more than we might think right now. So thank you, everybody. Okay, let's go to the next item on the agenda, which is the discussion about an appointment to the Council of Councils. And I will turn it over to Ms. Backman for that discussion.
Thank you, Chair Randall. As we all know, this day was coming. Ellen Posner from Fairfax County, who has served on the Council of Councils since its establishment of July 12, 2007, is retiring, full-time retiring, instead of her part-time retirement. So Fairfax County County Attorney has recommended Daniel Robinson. And I do want to know, I did have his last name. I apologize, Daniel, misspelled, but we did correct it. Daniel Robinson as his replacement to the Council of Council, or Ellen's replacement to the Council of Council. And just as a reminder, under responsibilities, the Council of Councils provides legal counsel and advice, legal support, and legal services and representation to the authority. But the key part of that is that we do not compensate the Council of Councils. But anyway, we would like to thank Ellen for her tireless efforts. The authority was established in 2002. And the creation of the Council of Councils, and I think we have Mr. Snyder, who was a part of the legal working group that did take place in 2007. The way the resolution is worded that established the Council of Councils is that any one of the member localities can have their attorney serve on the Council of Councils. So with Ellen's departure, Fairfax County has nominated Daniel Robinson.
Ms. Back, where do the other two people on the Council of Councils, what jurisdictions do they come from?
So currently we have Mr. Steve McIsaac, who has been on the Council of Council as long as Ms. Posner has, and he is Arlington County Attorney. And then we have Mr. Robert Dickerson, who is Assistant County Attorney for Prince William County.
All right, thank you very much. So. Actually, I was going to actually ask Mr. McKay, but he'd like to do that honor.
I would love to. I move the approval of the appointment of Daniel Robertson to the NVTA Council of Councils.
Motion is made and seconded by Mr. Parrish.
And Madam Chairman,
discussion on the motion, Mr. McKay.
Yeah, if I could just make a comment first. For those of us who know Ellen well, they know there is only one Ellen in this world, and we've been blessed to have her working on behalf of NVTA for a very long time. And so I want to publicly thank her for all of her dedication to this organization. And her steadfast leadership, getting us through what I know in the past were some very trying times, especially at the beginning of NVTA. And secondly, I want to welcome Daniel. I'm very familiar with him, and I think he's an excellent choice for the Council of Councils, and pleased to move the appointment of him. And I know he will dedicate himself in the same way Ellen did to making sure that NVTA has good legal counsel. And as you acknowledged at the beginning, this is done by the jurisdictions who are allowing themselves to send a representative from the county attorney's office to serve NVTA in a pro bono way. And obviously they do this because they're dedicated to making sure NVTA is successful. And so I would appreciate support of Daniel and welcome him to NVTA.
Thank you, sir. Other discussion on the motion, Ms. Wheeler?
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. Board Member Crystal?
No, thank you.
Mr. Wilson?
No comment.
Mr. Snyder?
All good.
Yeah, Madam Chair, just a couple quick comments. First of all the members of the Council of Councils from the beginning of NVTA they were far more than lawyers, they were counselors. At critical points, they were there providing advice and guidance that frankly made NVTA possible. So I want to recognize all of their contributions, especially Ellen, who could always be counted on for the very best advice. And hopefully we can recognize her service in some other way, some tangible way. Other than the words tonight, which are great. But in any event, this is a critical group that has provided a very substantial part of the infrastructure of this organization through the years at the very toughest of times. So thanks to all involved, and look forward to working with the new nominee. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Rischel?
So I want to thank Ellen very much, and I'm personally going to miss Ellen, and I don't know who I'm going to talk to now about things like Area 51, elongated skulls, and all things strange and unusual. So thank you, Ellen.
Area 51 and elongated skulls. What? Okay. Mr. Meyer?
No, I have no comments, and I think Area 51 is not in our long-range plan.
Never knew. Ms. Hines?
Well, thank you. I have learned an awful lot of things from Ms. Posner over the years and have appreciated when we were in live meetings the opportunity to have far-reaching conversations with her. So I will definitely miss her. I do look forward to meeting our new person, hopefully when we're in person again. And I'm sure this person will also be a wealth of information to us as we do our jobs. So thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Wilson, did I miss calling on you?
No, you did not. I had no comment.
Okay. Thank you. Delegate Watts.
No comment.
Delegate Rome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So first thing that I would note for our Fairfax delegation, as in Delegate Watts and Senator Boysko, perhaps a member of the General Assembly could put in a commending resolution for Ms. Posner, as that might be something, a nice little way to say thank you so much for your service and for all you've done for this body. So that's just an idea I wanted to throw around. And second, despite the lack of women that will now be on the council, I will support Mr. Robinson only because we have amazing women running the actual organization.
Thank you, Miss Rome. Amazing women run the world. We just don't tell the men. Mr. Culp.
How do I follow that? No, no comment, but thank you to Ellen, and no comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wood.
Yeah, no comment. Just thank you for your service. I know I said no comment, but thank you for your service.
Thank you. Ms. Curvo.
Just wanted to thank Ms. Posner for her frank and honest discussions. I think she and the councils are always looking for ways to be partners and work together to resolve problems. And I very much appreciated all that she did to keep that open dialogue and those discussions going to overcome any kind of issues that arose. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mitchell.
No comments, just congratulations to Ellen.
Thank you. Senator Boysko.
Just thanks for your service to Ms. Posner and congratulations to Mr. Robinson.
Thank you. Vice Chair Parrish.
Daniel, thank you. Thank you, Dev. I look forward to working with Daniel and getting to know him in the short period of time that I have left. But there's not enough words to be said about Ellen, certainly right now by me. So I'm going to say hi to Ellen after the meeting.
Wonderful. So since Ellen's in the room with me, I'm going to ask, are you going somewhere? Are you leaving the area? Or? I know that. She says I'm retiring. But are you staying around? Does Monica have your phone number? She's laughing at me like, I think she's changing her phone number. I think she's changing her phone number. I will say the first time I ever remember talking to you, I was chairing a PPE committee. No, not PPE, PPE committee. Planning and Programming Committee. And I didn't want to go into closed session because I hate going to closed session. And so you were sitting behind me, and I was and you said you may want to go into closed session. And I was like, no, thank you. And you said you may want to go into closed session. And then I turned around and looked at you, and I said, oh, we're going into closed session. Because although you said you may, clearly you were saying, look, lady, you just got here, listen to me and go into closed session. So remember that? So thank you. Thank you for all of your work. Thank you for everything you've done. I wish, like Mr. Parrish wishes, it could be a more formal thank you, but in the middle of COVID, all these things are hard. But since you're in the area, we will probably get to see you again or have you back when we can thank you in a more appropriate way. So I appreciate that, and I look forward to meeting our new council. And so instead of going through a roll call, well, I know I actually have to go through a roll call. I would say all in favor, please say aye. Mr. McKay.
Aye.
Mr. Chair Wheeler.
Aye.
Board Member Crystal.
Aye.
Mayor Wilson.
Aye.
Councilmember Stone.
Aye.
Mayor Rischel.
Aye.
Mayor Meyer.
Aye.
Ms. Hines.
Aye.
Delegate Watts.
Aye.
Delegate Rome.
Aye.
Kolb.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I forget. You don't get to vote. Ha,
There
ha.
you go. There you go.
Senator Boysko.
Aye.
And I am an aye as well. That motion will pass unanimously. Okay, the next item on the agenda is approval of the withdrawal cancellation of the VRE Lorton and Ripon Landing Station. I will go to Mr. Longi, and then I will go to probably to Ms. Chair Wheeler for the motion. Mr. Longi. No. Try it again. Nope. Make sure your volume was up. That was the problem with me. I was on, but my volume wasn't turned up enough. I mean, we can hear you in the room, but they can't hear you.
Headset then.
There you go.
I'm not going to go into detail in this item because I just took up a whole bunch of time trying to get connected. This item has gone through the Finance Committee and received a unanimous recommendation. It has gone through several other committees as the funding that this allows to become available has received a programming recommendation from PPC. I'll just summarize that the reason that we are doing this, quite frankly, is because of scheduling issues with VRE related to the pandemic. The VRE staff in their dispatch package tomorrow will be making a recommendation to the Ops Board to defund or to withdraw these two projects. Assuming that that goes through, the cancellation that you're being asked to vote on tonight will be recharacterized as a withdrawal, and VRE certainly will be welcome to apply for additional projects, perhaps related to these two stations in the future. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so I'm going to first go to Ms. Wheeler for questions. Just her district.
I have no questions. Our staff concurs with this. I'm fine whenever we're ready to make a motion. I'll come back and do that.
Okay. Just for discussion and questions, or actually, let's have a discussion within the motion. So how about we do a motion right now, Ms. Wheeler?
I move the authority cancellation or acceptance of withdrawals of the VRE Lorton and Ripon station projects, unencumbering a combined $16.9 million in project.
McKay, second.
A motion was made by Chair Wheeler, seconded by Chairman McKay. Discussion on the motion, Chair Wheeler.
No discussion. I'm new to the board, but I know this is a well thought out and that the money is going other places. And as long as our staff concurs and I've been read in, I'm very comfortable with this. I'm good.
Chairman McKay, you have discussion on the motion? Jeff? No discussion? Okay. Board Member Crystal.
Sure, Word. I think I might be for the VRE Operations Board on the authority. So just on behalf of the board, happy to support this and to note as well, we did this with our staff. This is actually, as far as project withdrawals go, I think a pretty happy one because we do see a lot of ahead to think afresh about these projects in a way that takes advantage of the major expansion of rail and passenger rail in Northern Virginia, as well as the Long Bridge expansion. So I'll note as well that this is a little more of a topic for an item upcoming, but I think I know rather that the members of the operations board are also very strongly supportive of the Franconia Springfield Bypass project, which is a project sponsored by the state, but I think had timing worked out a little differently, very likely would have been sponsored by VRE because it's such a critical project for us to be able to take advantage as commuter rail of these track expansions and track acquisitions and right-of-way acquisitions opportunities.
So Katie, you're on NVTA, NVTC, and VRE?
Yes, ma'am.
You are an enormous nerd.
I cannot argue with that. That is a very accurate characterization.
From a long tradition of Arlington transportation.
Very good. Mayor Wilson.
No discussion.
Councilmember Snyder.
No
Although
comment.
Katie is a nerd, I just want to say.
Yeah, that's clear. Mayor Rischel.
No comment. Thank you.
Mayor Meyer. Mayor Meyer.
I have no comment. Thank you.
Ms. Hines.
Objection.
Delegate Watts.
No comment.
Delegate Roan.
All metalheads are inherently nerdy, so I stand in strong solidarity with Board Member Crystal, and I have no other comments.
Listen, truthfully, all elected officials are inherently nerdy. People don't realize that.
Madam Chair, it's a prereq.
It is. Mr. Kolb.
No discussion.
Mr. Wood.
No discussion.
Ms. Curvo.
No comments.
Ms. Mitch.
Just one comment. Obviously, we support this very much, and the reason that we are able to, DVR is able to deobligate these funds or allow NVTA to withdraw these projects is because of the rail initiative that we have embarked on with CSX. And so these two projects are not going to be needed right now or in this time frame. So we're glad that this will have the opportunity to free up these revenues for other projects.
Wonderful. Thank you. Senator Boysko.
I have no comments.
Okay, Mayor, Vice Mayor Parrish, or rather Mayor Parrish, Vice Chair Parrish.
Thank you, Dev. Just a quick comment. Of course, the Finance Committee took this up, made the recommendation, and the PPC Committee also looked at this as well. So it's a good thing.
Okay. As the maker of the motion, Chair Wheeler, do you have a close?
Close as in any other further comments?
Yes.
No, I know that it's a shifting ball and we're moving around the money and I think it's going to help the region overall, so I'm fine with it.
Okay, thank you. Hold on one second, everyone. All right. All in favor, please say aye. Mr. McKay. Mr. McKay.
Said aye 3 times.
Mr. McKay, you run the largest. You run the largest, most populated county in get it together, man.
That's why I voted 3 times. You just can't hear me.
Get it together. Chair Wheeler.
Aye.
Board Member Crystal.
Aye.
Mayor Wilson.
Aye.
Councilmember Snyder.
Aye.
Mayor Rischel.
Yes.
Mayor Meyer.
Aye.
Ms. Hines.
Yes.
Delegate Watts.
Aye.
Delegate Roan.
Aye.
Mr. Kolb.
Aye.
Senator Boysko.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Parrish.
Yes.
And I am an aye as well. That would be unanimous. So now we come to one of the big items of the night, one of the two big items of the night, the planning and, the adoption of the 6-year program. So I'm going to send it over to Ms. Backman.
Thank you, Chair Randall. I just want to say this is a huge milestone before I turn it over to Mayor Wilson as Chair of the Planning and Programming Committee, because this is essentially the recommendation that you see before you is the recommendation being made by the Planning and Programming Committee. I just want to note that we, especially with your action that you just took on the BRE withdrawal/cancellation, we have approximately $539 million worth of revenues available for this 6-year program update. And now I would like to turn it over to Mayor Wilson.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, Ms. Backman. Let me very briefly just give you a quick account of the PPC meeting that we did have. All the committees, all the members of the committee met on Friday night, June 19th. It was very popular with all committee members' spouses. We did have a good conversation regarding the proposals, the staff recommendations that you have before us. We made essentially 3 changes really. We all related to the $16.9 million that we just voted to deallocate. Approved the staff recommendations subject to the change of allocating $700,000 to the Germantown Road Route 29 intersection improvements, which is full funding of a request from the city of Fairfax. This was a project that was very highly ranked, but ultimately was not when a choice was not the highest priority, but we felt it was still meritorious. And obviously, you see, it is a small request, and so one we were able to accommodate. We also allocated $8.3 million to the downtown Falls Church multimodal improvements project. Again, another full funding request for the city of Falls Church. Again, highly ranked, and one that we were able to fund in this cycle. And then the balance of that money, we were able to allocate an additional $7.9 million to the Franconia Springfield passenger rail bypass project, as Board Member Crystal talked about a couple minutes ago. Obviously, a project that has significant regional benefit for the Virginia Railway Express, and so. That was, in the end, the committee members felt like the most appropriate allocation of the $16.9 million that was available to us, in addition to the recommendations the staff made. I think the committee had significant praise for the very difficult decisions that the staff worked through in prioritizing an extremely competitive round of funding, and so. With that, we would unanimously recommend this funding scenario for our update to the plan. Are there any questions?
Thank you, sir. Let's go through and see if there are any questions. I'm getting a lot of okay feedback. There you go. Mr. McKay, do you have any questions?
Questions.
Ms. Wheeler.
No questions.
Ms. Crystal.
No questions.
Mr. Snyder.
No questions.
Mayor Rischel.
No questions.
Mayor Meyer.
No questions.
Ms. Hines.
No questions.
Delegate Watts.
No questions.
Delegate Rome.
No questions, Madam Chair.
Mr. Kolb.
No questions.
Mr. Wood.
No questions.
Ms. Curvo.
No questions.
Ms. Mitchell. Ms. Boysko.
No questions.
Mr. Parrish.
I plan on voting yes.
I have no questions except that is this is good work. This is very good work. So thank you to everybody. With the discussion we just had on COVID, we'll see what actually happens with all this in the future. But this is very good work, and I don't before we vote, I don't want to pass over how much work goes into something like this because it's an enormous amount. So all in favor, please say aye. Mr. McKay.
Does somebody need to actually, do we have a motion, Madam Chair?
Oh, I thought we had a motion. I'm sorry.
I would be happy
Okay.
to move adoption,
Actually, Mr. Justin,
authority
how about
adoption
you
of, I will move authority adoption of the FY 2020 to FY 2025 6-year program.
David, second it.
Actually, I'm going to second that. So the second goes to Chair Randall. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. All right. So we've discussed it already. So I'll just do all in favor. Chairman McKay.
Aye.
Chair Wheeler.
Aye.
Board Member Crystal.
Madam Chair, I do want to vote aye. Forgive comment for the record if possible. I wasn't sure if questions were the read opportunity or if it's something that's significant,
sure.
if we're doing another round of comments. I just wanted to certainly echo the thanks that you gave, particularly to our staff, as well as the Program Policy Committee for investigating this, discussing this at length last week. I just wanted to add a comment, which is that sort of speaking on behalf of Arlington, we do appreciate staff's partnership with us on a number of projects. I wanted to register been very hopeful that we would have seen funding of the Ballston Station second entrance in this project. We understand that our staff was not comfortable, or the authority staff was not comfortable moving forward without a greater and more formal signal of commitment from WMATA. But this is an incredibly important project that is nearly ready to move to design build. We very much plan to be back in 2 years to advocate for this project that we believe will serve the region as a terminus for many of the longer haul commuter buses and will be an incredibly impactful multimodal project for the entire region. Didn't want to let the opportunity go by without at least putting that on the record. I hope I'm here in 2 years for it, but if not, wanted the opportunity to reflect it during this conversation. To that said, I do vote yes.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Do you plan on being somewhere else in 2 years?
I'm just hoping we're all alive by then, you know?
You should see Justin's face right now.
You better be here. Come on.
We will, as you know, we rotate.
Didn't know what that was.
So I hope I'll still be with you, but we do, we rotate the chairmanship and the membership on the authority, which is what I mean.
Oh, you help you still be on the board. Please don't say I hope I'll still be with you. That sounds gotcha.
I'm really well and healthy, everyone. Thank you.
Things are getting rough over in Arlington, apparently. Jeez.
Gracious. All right. Mayor Wilson.
Aye.
Just a vote. Okay. Councilmember Snyder.
Aye, and thanks to all the staff.
Mayor Wishel.
Yes.
Mayor Meyer.
Yes.
Ms. Hines.
Yes.
Look at Watts.
Yes.
Look at Rome.
Aye.
To Cope.
Yes, and thanks to the staff.
Senator Boysko.
Yes, and thanks also to the staff for getting me up to speed so that I felt comfortable making the vote.
Wonderful. And Mayor Parrish.
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. I'm an aye. That motion will also pass unanimously. That's a big deal. That's a big one. So we have some updates. Mr. Wilson, did you want to do anything more on an update, or do you feel like you just gave your update enough for the Planning and Programming Committee?
I was going to say, I believe the committee just unanimously endorsed my committee's findings, so anything I might say would cause you guys to rethink that, so I'm going to stay quiet.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
The finance update, Mayor Parrish.
Unless you all feel that the information that's already in the packet, you need more information than that, I'm going to follow suit with Mayor Wilson and be quiet. Mr. Longy, do you have any thoughts that are important for the authority tonight?
Nothing to add to the staff report.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
So we don't have any, this is about the planning and programming, our technical advisory.
No.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so the reports for the Planning Coordination Advisory Committee and the Technical Advisory Committee are in the package. So we will move down to item 13, the Executive Director's Report. Ms. Backman, do you have a report to offer or comments?
I would that's my comment that's not in the packet. I do want to thank Ellen Posner for her service to the Council of Councils, and in addition to Steve and Rob as well. Sometimes I am calling several times a day, so I do want to say thank you to all of you because, well, with the exception of Ellen, Steve and Rob have full-time jobs, but Ellen had a part-time job and they really made themselves available. So thank you for that. Regarding the 6-year program update, I want to thank, in addition to the members, your staff as well. This was a collaborative consensus building process. And I think the fact that you unanimously adopted the 6-year program, the fact that we were able to stay on track with the 6-year program schedule speaks volumes. And given that this is a little over $500 million, and the authority, we were no different. We did have suffered some implications and impacts financially due to COVID, but we felt that it was important to continue to advance these projects. So I do want to say thank you. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Chair comments. I feel like I should always have chair comments because Mr. Noe had comments that like lasted for a half hour, right? So I feel like I should say something, but I don't. So you know,
okay.
except to say thank you. So good, because say thank you to the staff. We do have a closed session. I don't know how many of you have, Ms. Backman, have we brought everybody up on this issue or no? So you have, okay. So you have a closed session. And so what I'm going to do, since I have no comments, is this. I'm going to take a 5-minute break so you all can get up and stretch and people in the room can get up and stretch. And then I will come back and Mr. Parrish will read us in the closed session because you're the vice chair. Read us in the closed session. And then we will have a discussion on a closed session item. So let's take a 5-minute break, everybody.